Hello, everybody. Welcome to Trader Minute. It's great to have you aboard. I'm Carl. Thanks for tuning in this afternoon. Thanks for redeeming me, Jazz Ray. I appreciate that. On Deere, on John Deere up there. Yeah, my crystal ball has been broken for a while as far as those type of news announcements. I'll take that. So the market, man, it doesn't want to give up, does it? It keeps trying to buy the dipper crowd still out there. Now, interesting point. I believe it was Max brought this up a little while ago in chat. I following along the chats as I'm doing some other work here, and he says it hasn't been down 4 or 5 days in a row for a long time, right? No, it hasn't been down since that many days since here in September and August is where we've seen this. I talked about this a little bit yesterday. Now, technically, and again, the technicals aren't always that accurate here on the S&P. Of course, hindsight can prove you otherwise. But looking at this technically, you can see when it's hit the upper band and when it's broke the the center band, the 20-day moving average, how those tend to end up in the lower band, right? Well, it hit the band over here. Now it did not break the 20 here. A break of the 20 technically could push the market lower, right? But there's so many factors. I mean, we got a jobs report out tomorrow. It's just tough to play technicals here on the S&P, but it's worked in the past here. And maybe a great jobs report. I think that would be bullish for the market. But as you know, you've been in the market. Good news right now for the market and unemployment is bad news. Sorry, good news on unemployment is bad news for the market because it increases the odds of a taper. Okay, and we've talked about that. WK, good question. WK is asking if it's still okay to get into the win trade. Now, we talked about this morning. For those who didn't happen to enter this trade, the risk reward has changed. You're going to be paying a bit more for the options right now, which means you're paying a little bit higher price for the options. So the risk is there a little bit. But we're planning on riding this up to the 180 level. Okay, so risk reward has changed. We like the trade. We're in it. I can't tell you to run out and buy it legally, but we're in it, and we're in it till about the 180 mark. So we're really bullish on it. It just okay. Good question, Slavic. The risk reward is going to set up differently since you're getting it at a higher price. Okay, but yeah, again, we're in it. We're expecting it to go up to the 180. All right, so yeah, look at Win here. It's looking good. Hey, anybody caught any fish lately? Some of the other stocks we looked at yesterday, all right, Walgreens in the top three. It's still in that lower band. It's off the lows, but it's still in that lower Bollinger Band. Again, Walgreens right around to the 56 mark. If it gets close to that, if I was in a trade, that's where I would get out. And if you did get in, you've got a decent little return. I wouldn't stay in it too long. I'm still bearish on it. I'm not saying it's going to reverse on you, but that's where I would look to exit. Got close to it this morning. Yahoo, pushing a little bit higher again today, looking good. And then the last one from yesterday was Nucor. It's looking good as well. And we talked about these entrances yesterday, bull vibe entries for the most part, small walleye, good SPM. All right, what I want to talk about today for the training is sector rotation. There's a couple names for this in the stock market. Sector rotation. I also got the institutional money flow. And that's what I get into now. As I start saying this, Slavic brings up a question. So just step aside for a second from that. How to position yourself before tomorrow's information that's coming. I got the jobs report out an hour before the market opens tomorrow. Now, one thing you notice about Wynn, Las Vegas Sands, things like that, they're not paying attention to the market. Okay, they're not reacting to what the market's doing. They're not market driven. As I mentioned on Wynn and Las Vegas Sands, a lot of those big ones like that, is it's about Macau. Macau's 3 times the size of Vegas. It's growing like crazy. The revenues coming in from Macau are just been outstanding. All right. So that's my point on that. As far as the comment here about cashing out a win, if you want to cash out a win, that's fine. Cash out on a win. We're planning on staying in it to the 180 range. Yeah, you got a nice little gain. So, all right. Well, let's get back to sector rotation and institutional money flow. Okay, now when the big boys, when these big institutions, when they go out looking for areas to invest, they're not just looking for one stock to invest in, for the most part, right? They're looking for a bunch of stocks to invest in that are doing very similar things. If they wanted to go out and invest their tens of billions of dollars into a particular company, you could buy out the whole company, right? But if they push that money out into a bunch of companies, they can do it in a much more orderly manner, and the stocks are still going to perform relatively the same as far as being in the same type of a sector. Now, there's two terms, right? You got sectors and you have industry groups. Okay. A sector is a very large, broad group of stocks. Like take the energy sector. It's not just oil stocks. You have oil stocks, you have oil service companies, you have pipelines, you have oil drillers, you got exploration companies, gas companies, as far as natural gas and things like that. So it's a broad range of energy stocks. Now you take some more focused groups, and they're called industry groups. Is where you have, like for an example, say the beverage group, right? You've got Dr. Pepper, you got Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and those types. Okay, so they're direct competitors of one another. They're all doing pretty much the same things. Now, the terms in the market, the terms sector and industry groups are used interchangeably. CNBC, analyst comments or whatever, you see some people saying, we're looking at the so-and-so sector, and they're really talking about an industry group. Yeah, it's understood in the market. It's not like they made a big mistake. It's understood. A sector, an industry group, about the same things, right? They're differently technically, but when people talk sectors, they're talking groups as well. Okay, now if we can try to figure out where these big institutions are buying, do you think that gives us an advantage in the market? Of course. You get these guys spending tens of millions of dollars going out into these individual groups or sectors. It's going to drive prices as all this buying pressure is put on. Now, it's not just going to go straight up. Sometimes you can see where stocks almost just take off and they just keep going. But it's typically going to be uptrends, right? Where it goes up and pulls back, kind of like Nucor right here. Up and back. It's going to be pretty typical price action, but overall, when these guys are getting into these different areas, it can take them about 1 to 2 months sometimes to get into these positions, depending on the size that they're planning on taking. Okay, now there's a website out there that I like to use to look at sectors. It's called Bar Chart. This is a free site, and we're not affiliated with these guys, but it's a free site. You can just come here and use it. I don't have an account here. Okay, so I clicked on stocks, and now I'm just going to click on sectors. And this is taking us to groups, right? So if I click on industry groups right here, you're going to see there's around 200 industry groups here in the US stock market. Go away. About 200. Now the very top one here, called the top 100 stocks, and there's one very similar to it at the bottom called the bottom 100 stocks, is actually just a group of stocks that this company has this website has put together according to what they call the weighted alpha. Okay, and the weighted alpha is a measure of how much a stock has risen or fallen over a 1-year time frame, with more weight given to recent price movement. Okay, and this is their own little measure, and it's a pretty good measure. Right, so the higher the weighted alpha, the more that the stock has been going up recently. Now, the weighted alphas here are for these industry groups. And again, the top one here is not an actual industry group, and neither is the bottom. Okay, so this is saying the weighted alpha here is 265. Well, that's an average of all 100 stocks that are here. And then the next one here is solar. it's got 15 stocks. So here the average in there is 188. Now a lot of times when you see one of these groups with 15 stocks in it and that has a very high weighted alpha, you got a few of them in there has pretty high weighted alphas, and the others might be so-so because it can push it up, especially the smaller groups that you see down here with just single digits here. Okay, so it's a good way to be able to come here and find. Now, if you want to find a sector, there's a really fast way. It's just on FinViz. I'll just take you over to FinViz for a second. So let's say I want to find out what sector that Tesoro's in. So I put in Tesoro, and it's the middle one here. Right underneath the company's name, that's the group. This is the sector. Okay, so this is the broad range. Here's the group. So if I just click on that, well, there they are. You can see there's 33 of them here, 33 stocks. If I wanted to go a little bit further with this, well, I want all the optionable ones. Now there's 30. Well, I want to weed out all the small caps here. I mean, the small stocks. I want to go stocks that are traded over 1 million shares a day. Well, there we go. There's 9 of them here, all heavily traded stocks. You can very quickly glance through the charts just by hovering over these. Now it's a very, very rudimentary chart here, very basic. I'd always take these over the stock charts so you can put your indicators and setups on there. But just a quick way that you can see what a lot of the stocks here are doing. Okay, I'll use FinViz for that about every time. Okay. So you can come here. I'm going to click on top 100 stocks. Now this is a list of stocks that are the fastest moving stocks according to these weighted alphas in the market today. Fastest moving. If you want to see how much they're moving, right over here you click on performance. And check this out. You look at the 1 month percentage here. And look down this list. And you don't always just stick with the top because there could be some good ones. So here's one up, and okay, look at this. Wow, 41%. That's a $900 stock. Wow, I haven't seen that one. Now again, this does not mean run out and buy these stocks. You can go look at the charts. You don't know if they're optionable. Don't know how heavily traded they are. You still got to do a lot more homework on it. But that's one up 41%. This is up 30%. Now this is a $31 stock. That's a big move. 51% is a $19 stock. Some of these great big moves, like 82%, well, it's a $4 stock. I mean, it's still a move, but a lot of these lower dollar stocks, they're not optionable. I don't trade them. So I don't look at a lot of those. They got to come from somewhere, but I want them to start moving a little bit before. So you can look through the list. 37, 28%. That's a $30 stock. This list alone, the top 100, is a nice little list to look at. Now, there's one up 176%. It's a $52 stock. And there's another one I haven't looked at, Gentium Spa. Okay, but it could be worth looking at and see what they're doing, see if there's any type of an entrance there. But the worst thing you can do is come in here and say, wow, look at that. USA Truck, that's up 168% recently. Well, monthly it's up 12%. Here's one up 45%. Look at that and say, oh, wow, I'm just going to go buy it. It's the worst thing you can do because a lot of times these stocks get these great news, and that's what you see in the charts. They get great news, the stock runs up. You think I'm going to jump on, enjoy the ride, and of course, as soon as you jump on to enjoy the ride, down it runs, right, because of profit taking. So there's still a lot of work you got to do. You got to see if they're optionable. We trade options here. You want to see if they're optionable. You want to see how heavily traded the options are. And like the volume's going to be a giveaway there as far as the stock volume. If it has 500, 1 million or more shares per day is really good. It's typically really good. It's going to be good for the options as well. So this is a nice little group of stocks to keep an eye on. You're going to find the fastest stocks that are moving out there. Another thing I like to use here is what's called sectors change. So I click on sectors change. And when you come in here, you can see the filters is set at 1 month. And you can do a day, you can do a year, or whatever. Don't do a day. That's just not enough information. Always just stick with the month. Just stick with the month. Okay. So here we got oil exploration and products, the fastest moving group in the market according to their weighted alpha. So if I wanted to look at this, I just click on it. It's going to show me all the stocks in the group right here. But what the real kicker here is look at performance. Just click performance and it's going to rate this according to performance. So you can look, and remember how I said that a lot of times the ones with the high weighted alphas have a couple or a few of them that are moving good. Well, this one has two of them that are really moving good, 33%, 19%, but they're low dollar stocks. Not necessarily. I mean, you go look at those, but really that's not telling me a whole lot. So if I go back over here to sectors change, go down broadcast radio, truck, computer services, sometimes you'll start to notice that there's a lot of groups that are within the same sector that are all moving. Right now, look, I see medical, 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 a lot of medical stocks on the move right now, quite a few of them. So if I come into one of these, well, let's go look at the drug makers and then click performance. Now check this out. Look at all the green here in the 1 month list. Just about everything here. I'm going all the way to the bottom. This is a really big group. Groups aren't normally this big. I'd say well over half, probably 3/4 of all these within the group are all in the green in the last month. What does that tell you? It tells me that the institutions are buying into this group. Everything in here, practically everything's going up. The ones that aren't, this could have been down 20% the month before, now it's down 10%. So it's not, just because it's down doesn't mean it's not rising right now. Okay, so you got to go look at those. And what you want to do again, if you find a stock in here that looks really good to you, you like the percentages and the chart looks good, then you got to dig in a little bit more. Are they optionable? How heavy are the options traded and things like that to even decide if it's worth putting your money into. All right, so pretty nice little way that you can go in and a quick way to see what's moving out there in the market. So I go back to sectors change. Well, that medical one was doing. What about transportation? Come down here, click performance, and there you go. Look at it. Out of these probably 20 stocks or so in here, 2 of them are in the red. So what does that tell me? Institutions. There's no way private investors can move a whole group of stocks like that. Okay, there's like 40 million of us out there. I guess if we all banded together, like through an email or something, said, all right, this month we're all going to pile into the stocks within the transportation sector, the truck sector. Of course that's never going to work. So the only other thing this could be is institutions buying into this group. Right, and you can see the stronger performers in here. Here's one up 21%, 15%, 24%, 22, 27, 10%, and we're talking this is within the last month. So these are big percentages for a stock to move that much in a month. All right, so that's another thing you do, go through these. You'd have to do some homework on them. Are they optionable? How heavily traded are they? Because this doesn't give you any type of information like that. All right, so a nice way to be able to look through the sectors out there, see what's moving, and a lot of times you can find some nice moving areas and start to trade them before it really becomes popular, because these institutions, they're not going to go out and publicize and say, hey, yeah, well, this month we're going to go out and we're going to get into the trucking sector. And of course they don't advertise like that, because of course everybody's going to pile in ahead of them and it's going to push prices and make it more expensive for them to buy in. All right, so a nice little way to do that. Another thing you can do, and it's a pretty easy way to look at sectors, is come over here to FinViz. Yeah, Mike, casinos, they're down the list a little bit. I think because a lot of times when they show up in these lists, they've already been moving. They were there earlier this year as far as the casino stocks, since we're in win right now. They were moving earlier in the year, but a lot of times, and that's why I say just don't go jump into these, because a lot of times when they show up on this list, they've already made a nice move, right? So you got to remember, could be a little bit old, but not really. Sometimes it can take them 1 to 2 months to get into these positions. Okay, so good question, Mike. Thanks. So another thing you can do very quickly here on a day-by-day basis, you can come over here to FinViz, free website. We use it all the time, and just click on the big old market carpet, heat sensor, different words for it. A lot of people call it a heat sensor, and I'm like, what? When I think of heat, I think of red. Is it just me? So I look at this as a market carpet, but you'll see they call them heat sensors. That's kind of the big thing for them. And they're kind of small, but if you click on it, you can zoom in. After you click, you can use your scroll wheel and you can zoom in on these small ones to see what they are. The larger the boxes, the bigger the company, the larger the market cap, right? See, ExxonMobil is the biggest. And one time, remember that? One time Apple was bigger than ExxonMobil. When Apple was up around $700, they had the largest market cap on Earth, I believe, at the time, at just about three-quarters of $1 trillion when Apple was up in the $700 range. All right, so and what you can do here when you do this, it's going to be, you notice it's a 1-day performance. It's set on 1-day performance over here. You can change that if you want. If you want to look more long term, go to a month. You can look at a week or a month. So if I click on a month, you're going to notice it's going to green because after all, the market's been in this freight train mode for a while. Mostly green. Now, if you start to see the monthly turn red, then there's been some selling going on. If I bring this back to a week performance, see the red start to pick up a little bit here. All right, so, and then you can also look at this as from a world perspective. Now remember when we were having the big financial crash, everything was going down. It wasn't just here in the United States. It was basically it was the whole world. Markets were pretty much going down. And at the time, you remember, people started saying, "I don't know if the U.S. is gonna lead us out of this one," because it always has. The U.S. has always led the rest of the world out of those type of events, but not last time. If you were watching this chart back then, the two countries that you saw come out of that recession, that crash first, were Brazil and China. Hey, I was working with a lot of people back then, and some of the people I was working with were buying Chinese stocks and some of these Brazilian stocks. And the U.S. was sluggish, still going down a little bit. They were making money like crazy as these markets were just skyrocketing. So from a world perspective, again, this is just a 1 week we're looking at. You can come out here and say, well, what's moving out there in the world? If the U.S. isn't moving, what stocks are moving? Come out here, you can click on China, and see how tiny those boxes are. You just scroll in on it, and you'll start to see those appear. Right? I mean, here's some of the bigger names. Baidu, and you got Mapel, and I mean, there's Sina. They're all in here, and Sohu. There's a lot of these here. Here's China Mobile. And so easy way to go out and find, well, if the U.S. stocks aren't moving, which ones are? You can see, obviously, Brazil is not moving right now. The U.S., we're looking at a week here. Again, there's some pockets of strength, but overall, with the U.S., a little bit in the red for the last week. And, we're down 5 days in a row. If the market finishes down, this is 5 days in a row for the market. Okay, so that's why we're starting to see this. Another thing you can do here is you can click full. Now this brings up the 9 sectors and all the industry groups within the sectors. This takes a little while to load, and that's just a ton of stocks. Again, same thing. If you want to zoom in on and see what all the small boxes are here, just click on it, and you go. And you can see what those are. I mean, it gets pretty far. That's about as far as you can go, but again, the tinier the boxes, the larger the boxes, the larger the company, basically. So another way you can see, and then let me go back to a day, and let's see what this looks like today. Yeah, a lot of reds out there. You can see some of the strength over here, drilling, oil and gas drilling. You got Petrobras just down slightly. The color below, the brighter the green, for some reason it's not going down on me. You can see what the code is here. The bright green is up 3%, and this is a daily chart, so these bright green, these stocks are up 3%. The bright red is down 3%. The darker colors here, 0 to slightly down or slightly up on the greens. Okay, so yeah, just some really quick ways you can look day to day, see what's going on there from a world or an S&P 500 view. Over here at bar chart, it's nice. You can come in here and see which areas of the market are moving. And right now, we notice there's a lot of medical, right? Medical, a lot of different healthcare type stocks are on the move. Medical products, medical. Look at them all. They're just lined up down here. So right now, if you want to look for some stocks that are moving right now as a whole, I mean, a lot of the sector is moving. Look through these biomedical drugs. Now I know Steve, you all probably all understand a lot more about these companies than I do here, but pretty interesting to see the areas that are moving, and go in, and look for a trade setup. Find a stock that looks good, and try to find a trade setup on them. Okay. All right, so that's the training. Got anybody want to look at some stocks? If you do, type something in, and we'll take a little time, and we'll look for some stocks, look at some setups with you. If you got anything you want to look at. Yeah, there's a biotech for you. Should have had my crystal ball out on that one. We could have gotten in that one. Hindsight's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, a stock like this, I wouldn't trade it today. It's nice to look at. It's fun to look at. And if you happen to be in the trade, man, nice work. But this is one of those fundamental moves rather than a technical move that you wouldn't have seen coming. And yeah, when stocks do this, you'll hear me say this time and time again. What you do, you gotta give it a few days to a week to settle down and find a higher high, see where the thing's going to settle in, and then maybe look to try to play it up. If this so if it pulls back slightly, maybe to, I'm just throwing numbers out here, maybe to 67.5, and then holds a little bit of a bottom and pushes higher and starts breaking above this high of today, then you got a setup, and it's settled down off the original news, and then you got something. But right now, it's good to look at. It's fun to look at, but no entrance here. IBM, yeah, it's still right there. It's under the 7. It's showing a little bit of support right around this 175 mark. Yeah, if this rolls over, watch it into the close. It did the same thing yesterday. You notice yesterday it shot clear up there to the 7, went back down lower. So watch it into the close. It's a tough call. It's still in a downtrend. It's still below the 7, so it's still showing some bearish signs here. But if it closes back above the 7, you'd get out. But watch it and make a decision towards the close today. It did the same thing yesterday and sold back off. China Life Insurance. Haven't seen this in the very lightly traded stocks. The options would probably have really wide spreads. But man, a nice move here. It got up. It's kind of rolled over here at 49. This is one of those, it's kind of in no man's land right now. A push up through 49 would be positive for it. I'd check that news. Maybe some earnings or something back over there mid-November. I'd check the news on that. Yahoo, yeah, it's still looking strong. Still looking good. It's entering the upper Bollinger Band. Now the bands are pretty wide here, so if it closes back inside, that's not a reason to get out. What I would do here if I was in this trade, watch this thing. I wouldn't keep a stop down here around the 7 after it's got that move, but it wouldn't be on a close below the band here, because that's not why we got into the trade, was in the upper band. I'd move a stop up. Just keep it, well, the 7's not too far, but I'd maybe move the stop up a little bit here, just to protect yourself a little bit. But right now, I mean, there's no bearish signs here. The volume is going to be really strong today. It's still pushing higher up to the $40 range. That's where I look to exit. Now, Toyota, if you haven't seen Toyota, it's still in this downtrend. It's too late to get in. It's way too far down. The time to enter would have been, of course, hindsight, on this move right over here. See where it came back up to the 7? Let me zoom in. I know that really helps, sorry. But right here. And the reason it's not a trend rider bear, it's not a trend rider bull or a vibe bull bear or anything like that, because it's just kind of going sideways. Could look at the averages, but what this is, stock's been in a downtrend, and there's another entrance just kind of like it right here. Those are two times that you could have entered a trade here because you had an established downtrend. At this point, right, it was forming a little bit of a descending triangle, but notice how it hit the 7 the day before and then hits it the next day, gaps up, and then pushes back below it, and it's a strong bearish candle, a big bodied bearish candle there. As far as meaning just it's a filled candlestick right there with a big long body. Those are the stronger candles. And then it came up again, could not get through the 7, and then pushes back up through the 7. By the end of the day, rolls over and goes with another long bodied filled candlestick here. Very bearish. As far as right now, if I was in this trade, man, it's coming up on the 200-day moving average. Doesn't mean it has to be support for it. Typically, the 200 is one of the better ones for most stocks. It'd be a long-term trend changer to see that drop below it. But it could come down to the 120. I don't think it'd have much of a problem. So with XLNX, this would be one to watch. So it had the downtrend. It's come up here. This is the turning point right here at 44 for it. If it holds 44, it just locked in a higher low. If it can't hold 44, it's likely to come back here to the 33 range. But so far, for the last week or more, it's been holding 44. A strong move would be push up through the 7-day right here and hold it. If yesterday's candle would have held up towards the highs, then the odds are this going up higher there. It's got contracting band, so it's not likely to go far. But a break of 44 right here would be pretty bearish and drop it back to the lower band. So it's just right on a point right now. With Ruger, yeah, push lower here off the 7. It's had a nice uptrend here. You don't trust these initial moves down as far as buying a put because it's been in this nice uptrend. And so it's trying to hold 72.5. If I bring in, see, it's above 70, which is a positive for it. Yeah, it's not even a vibe bull. It's got to get back above that 7 for a vibe bull. There's just no setup here right now on this one. Either way, if it rolls and goes bearish, then if you go over to the trend rider, it could enter that lower band, but it's got to break 70 right there to get into the lower band. So that's a little ways down. So that's just not a move, not a trade here on this one today. With the diamond here, no trade. I mean, it looks weak. It looks weak, but as far as it's like it could come down into the lower band, but there's just no real indications of what this thing's going to do as far as looking for that, trying to forecast a move here. Yeah, you could say, well, you got a bearish cross over the MACD, but there's better setups out there as far as trying to find a trade here. I'd look elsewhere. As far as calls, no, it's below the 7. In order to play calls here, you'd want this thing to get back up above the 7 before you'd get bullish on it. That's what I want to see. The first site that I went to bar chart. Is this one you're talking about? Check these sectors. Went to bar chart, then I clicked on stocks, and then I clicked on sectors. That's where I went, Jersey. All right, Best Buy. So a lot of these, not Best Buy. A lot of the big retailers like a Walmart, Target and some of those, if you've seen those charts, they're getting pounded. Looked into that, and this is what I found was a possible rise in the minimum wage, which could hurt the Walmarts and the Targets of the world. That's pretty much the majority of their workforce. I imagine is getting minimum wage. They hiked that; it's going to cut into their profits, right? So far on Best Buy, a little bit of profit taking. It's not breaking 42. Not that 42 is important, but it's not breaking 42. Still well above the 7. I don't see any bearish signs here. Look at the volume. Very, very light volumes. Just a little bit of a pullback. And you can expect little pullbacks. But if it breaks the 7, then get out. But right now, it broke through 42. Again, 42 is not a magic number. But it broke up through it. Not falling below it. Still holding there. Still above the 7. The bulls still have the odds here. How to position before tomorrow? If I was in a stock that moved with the market, then and if I was bullish on it or even bearish, it's not a bad idea to take some gains if you got them, or maybe to exit just in case, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. If they got a great number out tomorrow with the jobs, then we could see the market fall. Okay. But if it's a weak number, you could see the market, start pushing back up. It's a tough call, but if you're in stocks that don't really move with the market at all, you should be fine. And that's one of the reasons we chose Win. It hasn't been moving with the market at all. Market's up, Win does its own thing. It's down, it does its own thing. The market right now is down, Win's breaking out. It's a multinational company now with everything they got going over there in Macau and not just Wynn, but Las Vegas Sands and the MGMs, and they're doing fine. So if you happen to be in trades that could be affected by the market, then it wouldn't hurt if you got some gains to take it and get out just in case. Now I say that, and then all of a sudden you get out, and then tomorrow they keep going because the news was good. Well, you got out, you took your gain, and you were just protecting yourself. It's like insurance, right? You're just insuring your gains, and everybody pays insurance premiums every month just in case. But even though like we have automobile insurance, just because I didn't get in a wreck didn't mean my insurance went to waste, right? Okay, so that's what I do, Slavik. I would just look at your positions. If you got something, you could compare them to a chart of the S&P, and if they're moving just like it, and you got a bullish position or even bearish, it's a tough call as to which way it's going to go, because we don't know that answer yet. So it wouldn't hurt to little trimming on some of the gains. Doesn't mean you have to jump out of everything if you're following the markets, but it wouldn't hurt to take some off just in case. Good question. F5 Networks. So this one right here, it's been in a downtrend. It's forming a little bit. You could call it a descending wedge. You could call it a symmetrical triangle. There's different ways you can look at this. A symmetrical triangle, some people would call them a cone, but kind of look like this. There's different names, right? You could also argue that, well, that's not it. It's really a descending wedge. Either one of these, watch which way it breaks out. If this breaks to the upside, it's going to be bullish. But one thing I look above here, we got all these moving average. You got the 200-day just above it. You got the 50-day. Now the 100's clear up at the 200 and the 50-day for stocks. It's going to be hit and miss from stock to stocks. I don't see a lot of action here around the 50 myself. Just sense to go around it. Now the 200 is a little bit different from most stocks. Most stocks, the 200 again is a little bit bigger deal to break, and it's just below the 200. It's a tough call. If it breaks up through here, the price, if it's a descending wedge pattern here, which you could argue it is, it's a continuation pattern of more downside. But what you want for confirmation is for something like this. You want this thing to break down out of the range like that and start moving down. If that does, it's likely to get through 80 and keep going. Now if I bring in the Bollinger Bands, I want to see where they are. Bollinger Bands, please. There we go. So they're pretty tight. I brought those in because when the stocks start to consolidate like that, the bands will tighten. And that's what's going on. But whichever way this breaks to the downside. If it gets in that lower band, it could just keep on going down. Right now the bands are just kind of flattening, right? But it's got to prove to me it's going to go one way or the other. It's got to be on a nice break to the upside or a big push to the downside. Just got to watch and see what happens. Overall, with all those averages and stuff above it, a little bit the odds favor the Bears, but it's too early to call. I wouldn't jump in anything. When I talk about my stop how to management, what stock are you referring to? Sorry, what stop are you referring to, Richard? I'm sorry, I'm way behind on these chats. All right, while you're typing that in, let me go to LNG. All right, Cheniere Energy. Hope I'm saying that right. Nice job, Sean. Sean's in calls on this. Beautiful breakout here above it today. There was, well, and we did, this was not a one of my picks or anything like that. It had a bull vibe entrance right here. In fact, it had a couple right here and here. All the average is rising, pushing up. Now, the action I would have been looking at right there is all this volatile reaction right here, and it got up through that no problem. Breaking out today is very bullish. Where this is in the upper band right here. Now, Sean, I'm never going to argue just getting out and taking a nice gain. If you got a nice gain, hey, if you're happy with it, get out and stay out, and just watch it if it keeps going. Volumes are pretty big recently, not outstanding, but they're pretty big. You can see what this has done in the past when it's broken out. But this would be one of those that if it's as long as it stays in the upper band, you could stay in the trade. If you wanted to taper out a little bit of a time, you could sell half a position, and then hang on to the rest and just stay in it till it closes inside the band. So the two choices, either one of those, would be fine. Okay, so Bristol Myers. Right, Bristol Myers, just recently? I know this was one of mine a couple days ago, something like that. Turn right or bear, you bet, I'd stay in this. Today even makes it more so. You can see how it run up. Let me zoom in on this, you guys, so you don't have to get out your magnifying glass. So you see how yesterday it went up. I did this 2 days ago on that candle right there, where it broke down below the support level there, broke into the band slightly, went up, tested the 7 yesterday. By the end of the day, sold back off. And today went up to it again and is now rolling through the 51. If this band ends up in that lower, if it ended right here, I'd stay in. This is very bearish price action. The only way I'd get out if it closed back above the 7. You notice we're very simple-minded. Okay, as far as that 7. The more you use it, the more you're going to love it. Short in Cedro, watch it into the close. It's been holding this level, and you notice the volumes are picking up around here. This could be some support for it. I'd watch into the close, but these big volumes like that as it's falling, and all of a sudden it's holding, basically it's holding 41.5 right there. It could be support for it. I'd watch it close. I don't think I'd stay in it much longer if I was short on this, just for that reason. But if this rolls over into the close today, then it's a different story. But right, you can see those big volumes as it's holding 41.5. There's a lot of buyers right there. Okay, so if it closed like this, even if it had a decent candle, I just wouldn't stay in it much. Oh, Realty. Now, this is one of those stocks, and I said this on chat a little while ago. Stocks in the lower right, and Jeff says this all the time too. Stocks in the lower right tend to stay there. Stocks in the upper right tend to stay there as well. Okay, this is in the lower right. The last support for it was way up here, just above 38. It's broken through that. It's still quite bearish. You notice it's a little ways from the 7. Got a little bit yesterday, a little bit of consolidation today. Overall, still bearish. I mean, trying to find a bottom here, you'd have to look longer term and see if they've been here. But if I was in a trade, I would not get out today. It just right at what that 7. Yeah, good point, Sheila. Sheila says if they raise the minimum wage, it's a salary cut to the rest of us. Yeah, good point. I'm reading through chat. Sorry. Okay, Cisco. Yeah, very bearish. It's got had the big earnings miss. It made some big news, and it just remained below that 7 every time. Every time it gets through it, keeps pushing it. Break at 21, and the stock's dropping probably to 20. Just a very bearish chart. I would look at this point. I'd look for it to break down through the 20 range. Sorry, 21 range before I think of getting in. A little bit. It have to be a little bit stronger moves than that, but I'd give it. It had to push through 21. If I was in the trade, I'd just watch this 21 range. It close above the 7, I'd get out. It's just in such a tight little range right there. I don't think it's usually they're not going to move really quickly when stocks do that. As far as some type of a little rally or something like that. With Intel, nice little breakout today. Had some good volumes yesterday. Apparently, it didn't like being below the 7 there, so it's roosting up above it. As far as a trade right here and now, there's better setups. It's bullish. It could go higher, but there's no really indicator setups. If I bring in the vibe, yeah, you could call this a vibe entry. All the averages, well, it's close here on the 100. It's just kind of going sideways. But they're just better setups. If I had calls on this, I'd stay in. But I wouldn't enter a trade right here. There's just better setups out there. It's a bullish setup, but you've seen what I look for in my top threes, the vibe and the bulls, and this doesn't quite cut it with those. Target. Yeah, they've had a wild day. I mean, this kind of looks kind of like McDonald's, Walmart's yesterday's, right? Walmart's was a lot bigger, but a pretty volatile ride today. It's still in that lower right, but to get bullish, I'd need this to go above the 7. If I was bearish, I'd love to see it reverse and head lower into the close today. That would be a great sign. Right now, it's just kind of hanging there. Too early to get bullish. If I was in bearish, I'd love it to run lower, but even then, it's not an entry just because it goes lower today. I would wait for a little bit more. But yeah, it's weaker looking than anything to me with this one. Yeah, it's going to have fluctuations all day. Up, down, up, down. That's just stocks during the day. Right now, very bullish. It's going to have big volumes once again today. Still running up. Not worried about when. Looking good. Anybody catch any fish lately? Himax Technologies. I had a nice breakout a couple days ago. Well, just yesterday, sorry. Off that 7, got a vibe bull entrance. You got some big volumes back in this. The 11 right here has been resistance here in the past. A breakthrough 11 would be very bullish. It might do that. It's got some big volumes, holding a level nicely. It might see a break above the 11. If it doesn't happen today, it might happen within a few days, I would imagine. But a bullish looking chart. Not an entry right now, but yesterday would have been a decent entry. But yeah, it's a good looking setup. Richard, I was wondering what stop that you were looking at, what stop you were referring to. Microsoft, yeah, I'd check the news on this. I haven't checked the news on it, but that's a big reversal right there. Big volume, ran down, dropped a little off the lows, but that's a big candle. There could be some news out there on Microsoft today. I have to go look and dig into that. Yeah, I could do it real quick here if you wanted. Look at all that news. It'd take 20 minutes. Uh, I don't think things slump out of the gate. We'll stay. Well, Mullally will stay there till the end of the year. I know 2014, so I don't know if that's Mullally not going there. Oh, they named a new CEO, so Mullally is out. Okay. So yeah, without going through all that news, I'll let you guys go through all that news. But it looks like nice PW. That's one fish I always wanted to catch. DVA. So if I bring in the trend writer for this one, band's really wide. Let me go here. It's one of those stocks that just there's no signal here. If I was bearish, I'd probably stay in. Looking to see where some support for this might be. Um, there is some right where it's at 57. It's below the averages. Whenever you see a stock below the moving averages, it's typically bearish type of a trade. But as far as any type of an entry, I don't see one here today. But this is very bearish. You notice it went from the upper band here, hit the upper band, closed back inside, and then broke through the center. Broke through the center band. Wrong band. Yesterday broke through there. So the odds of this coming back to here are there. But they're just, I mean, you're just going kind of more emotions than anything that this is going to come down to that level. But if I had puts on, I'd watch it around 57. But if it breaks down through 57 by the close today, it's still very, very bearish. Yeah, typically with the 7, what we'll do is when we say close on the 7, what we'll do is if it looks like it's going to close in a bearish trade above the 7, then that would be the time to exit. This stock's not going to be one to show you on. Let me look for another one that can show you this. Okay, let's look at Johnson & Johnson. Okay, so with Johnson & Johnson, and let's zoom in on this. Now this isn't any type of an entry, but let's say we got an entry signal right here. So we happen to get in a trade. It's pushing above the 7. I got to bring in some other on the vibe. Okay, so now let's look at this. We can look at some vibe entrances. So this is in a locked up position right through this range. So what's in a locked up position, you can start trusting the moves above the 7 a little bit more. Okay, so everything's locked up here, and you see this candle right there. It's moving up through the 7. Okay, so when we say a stop on the 7, what that means is when it closes back below the 7, well, that's when you should get out, and that would be right here, right? So it got you out, a little bit of a loss. Okay, well, that puts you right back in the next day. It's another strong bull vibe signal. You had the uptrend already going. Get you in here, and it got ugly for a day or two, didn't it? All right, that day might have scared you pretty good, but look what happened by the end of the day. It was right back on the 7. You would have got out up there. Okay, but what you do, you don't wait till it closes and then get out the next day. If it looks like it's going to close below the 7, last for individual traders out there, watch it last 10-15 minutes. Looks like it's going to close below the 7, then get out before the close on that day. Okay. Matt, you'd have to talk to see if you can't talk to one of Options Express's traders, see if they have that available. Okay. Yeah, the thing is, I don't know if you could program that, because if you put a stop on a 7, a program stop, let's say on a 7-day moving average, well, it goes through it in the middle of the day, it's going to knock you out. I don't know if you could. Oh, okay. Well, but if you could time it and say, all right, if it's the last 10 minutes of the day and it's below the 7, then sell it. That's what you'd have to do, is something like that, and see if they got that. But if it just closes below the 7, it could knock you out in the middle of the day and then go back above the 7 and you're in it. Yeah, above or below. If you're bearish, a close above the 7 would put you out. So if you're in puts and it closes above the 7, then you'd be out. So as an example, well, and there's not the greatest examples, because but let's say we got in, this was, all the big averages were all down, and we got into a trade right here because it closed below the 7 when it was downtrending, right? Just drawing this in here for you. So it gets in. Well, you get out on a close above the 7, like right there. On a bullish trade, you get out on a close below the 7. So if we happen to enter a trade here, we would have got out, up in that range. Up in that range. That makes sense. So a bearish trade to close above the 7, a bullish trade to close back below the 7. All right. No, long tail up in this ranges doesn't show me anything, especially it's not even closed. But even if it closed right here, nothing to worry about. You get these long tails from time to time. It's really, it's nothing, especially early on. We don't know how this is going to close. But right now it still looks really strong. It was sitting there at that 170 range today, and the way it kept going at it, and going at it, the volume was building. The way it kept going at 170, I knew it was going to break, and it just looks strong still. So you guys caught some steelhead, huh? Good, cool. That's one stock, one fish I want to catch. Lots of trout, stuff like that. Steelhead's on the list. I'm just kidding around, you guys. Yeah, Snippa, we're trying to ride this. We're gonna want to ride this up to 180. So okay, everybody. I will be on chat with you all afternoon. If you have any questions, just put those in there. Anything else you want me to look at, just put those in there. But I'm gonna get off here. Let's go out and start looking around for my top 3. I'll be back on about 3 o'clock Eastern time, and present the top 3. Okay, have a great day. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.